Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome to the webinar, 6 months to EUDR implementation. Thank you for joining us. We have some participants coming in. Good to see all of you. Today we have some very interesting speakers here. Like, it's only 6 months, there's a lot to do. Basically, the question we're going to answer today is what concrete steps can you actually take? And we have Isabelle Bion with us from SIFCA, who's actually been doing a lot of this work already when it comes to rubber, and can tell us a bit more about that. And then we also have Eva Ritte from Grafon Westfalen, who can tell us a bit more about the legal side of EUDR and what you can do basically to prepare for that better. Who am I actually? You might be wondering. I'm Ingrid van Beusboom. I work at Satelligence. I'm a customer success manager. Some of you might have interacted with me as well. And who we also have here today is, you see his face on the screen, Niels Willaert, our CEO. And he'll be speaking a bit as well about what the current state of play is. So let's give it a few more minutes for some more people to drop in, and please continue giving your answers in the poll here. All right, let's start. I'm ending the poll and let's take a look at the results and see who we have in the room here. Can everybody see this? Yes, very good. So in what way is your organization affected by EUDR? Most people in the room here actually are operators. Well, the onus is on you, so good to have you here. But we have quite a lot of people also who are further downstream traders, supplying or advising on EUDR. How prepared is your organization for EUDR in the process? Well, that was to be expected, though it's pretty impressive that 21% of people are saying they're as prepared as one can be. Very good, guys. And for those in the 19% orientating phase, good to have you here. That's exactly what we're here for today. What's your primary concern? Gathering traceability data on time. Yeah, not so easy. Isabelle will speak more on that. Accuracy, very interesting. We'll treat that as well. Legality, so talking about that. And interpretation of NCAs, so talking about that. Very good. The big question. With the EC benchmark out, the country benchmark, are you going to alter your due diligence process? What do we have here? Most people say it does not change anything. It's kind of what we expected, and good to know. Some people are saying it simplifies it a lot. Okay, that's interesting as well. We're hoping to hear your views later on. Some people are saying it only makes it more complex. Okay, varied response here. Then let us get started with our first speaker, who's Niels. And Niels will speak to us a bit about the current state of play.
Hey, everyone. Such a pleasure to see so many of you join this webinar. As the #1 EUDR service provider for agricultural, food and beverage chemicals, we get a lot of EUDR news directly from our clients and government contacts. Here's a few highlights. Firstly, many of our clients aim to be ready by this summer already. Why? Because shipments will take a few months. Take this into consideration. Secondly, you might have heard some rumors about new delays. Agricultural ministers in the EU have indeed tried to push back and potentially delay EUDR again. However, it is not the environmental ministers making these kind of claims. To make this formal, that has to happen first, and it has not yet happened. Reality is, our clients and our government contacts are continuing their preparations as if the legislation will enter into force end of this year. However, it is a good idea to keep an eye out for new updates and simplifications that are due to be released by the 30th of June. It's about the omnibus regulation, but keep an eye on it. We'll keep you posted. What kind of preparations does Satelligence work on in the meantime? Well, we are the first and only in the industry to offer a dry forest map layer. This is important in areas where the trees lose their leaves, which obviously is not deforestation. This is important to several cocoa, rubber, soy, and coffee growing areas. Open data do not exist to address this issue. Secondly, we'll release the first ever planted coffee map for the whole world. We'll make this open source. And finally, we achieved independent scientific validation of the accuracy of our map layers. And this is very important compared to other mostly open data layers. It showed with proof that our layers can be considered the most trusted layers. Further news, we're closely collaborating on dry runs, 14 of them for different commodities, with the competent authorities. What are dry runs? Dry runs are like the testing of the procedures, is all the data in order, contacts with the customs to do one specific shipment of palm oil or soy, etc. So the lessons learned so far, for example, for soy for Brazil, are that national level forest layers do not necessarily comply with the requirements of EUDR. And also, one lesson there was that there's difficulties in providing legal data, for example, on tax administrative data. Do you want to know more about the lessons learned from competent authorities? Please do reach out to our team and we will further discuss these things with you. Finally, you will know that EU has released new country benchmark data. Countries are either low risk, medium risk, or high risk. What does that mean in practice? Satelligence will continue to monitor all the areas irrespective of whether it's low or medium risk. Why? Well, first, because of the competent authorities, they will audit and verify 1% of all the producers, also in low-risk areas. And secondly, because campaigning NGOs can deliver substantiated evidence to the competent authorities that they will then have to follow up. So even if there's a low-risk country, you really need to continue monitoring it. And that is what Satelligence helps our clients to do. To make this a bit more tangible, let's have a look at one of these low-risk countries and what's going on there. In this case, Ghana.
So yeah, here you see on the right panel deforestation. Those are the red areas popping up. So we know that up till today, every week we get new information in the system. And on the left, you can see that the deforestation is going up. So since 2020 and last year, 2024, even this year, half year, it's already more than it's been for the full year of last year. So that's very significant because this is a low risk country. Do you want to not monitor this? I don't think so. In the next slide, we'll see this very same area, but then within our app. That is on our online app where you can see is zoom in here to the green areas that are forest and the brown areas which are cocoa and the red areas are deforestation. So if we zoom up a little bit closer, we can actually find a plot with recent deforestation last month. We anonymized the name of the producer here for privacy issues. But this goes to show that this plot had deforestation as recent as last month. And this is a risk for EUDR, even in a low risk country. So we at Satelligence cover all the areas anyway, irrespective of risk areas, very up to date, very easy access. So that's why we help our clients tackle this. Now, what if you don't have plot data? We'll have an approach where you can look at the jurisdictional level. That means any district or provincial level. So at the risk at the sub-national level, which are the districts where there's more deforestation than others. You can use this type of information to prioritize where you need new plot data that you don't yet have or where it is not needed. So this is a very helpful approach, and many of our clients are very happy with it to have the overview of their full supply chain, even in areas where they don't have plots. So today, we are aiming to provide some super practical examples of the steps that should be taken, how to make your life easier. And a big part of that is that the digital tools that we provide automate a lot of the painstaking, time-consuming efforts that you would otherwise have to do manually. You don't need to do that anymore. But we should not automate everything. Having a human in the loop, human checks is very crucial. So the first step, let's get into that fast, is activating your sourcing data. And we already had a look at the plots. So in the next slide, if you have polygon data, you can now upload it very easily in an automated way into our platform to achieve full traceability. So this is showing like an actual upload for a fictive company that we have here. It shows how the data, and basically we do that for some clients. They have a few hundred plots, but also some of our very big clients in the top 5 of the global food agriculture companies, those are uploading like 500,000 plots at a time. So we really need to do this in an efficient way. In the second step, you can see that we have an automated way to check the quality of these plots. Because in practice, it often happens that the boundaries overlap or that the location is in a city area where actually there is not a plantation, or even the coordinates are in the sea, or the coordinates simply don't match the requirements of the EU system. Well, we automatically detect for all those hundred thousands of plots that we receive, you can see that here, whether they are correct or not, and work with you to correct it. So having all those plots in order, then it comes to a critical part being the assessment of deforestation and legal risks. So the risk assessment, what is important to say here is that in our discussion with the competent authorities, we are in close contact with them. As I said, we were involved in several of these dry runs to check all the procedures, how it goes in practice. Competent authorities expect to review a pack of PDF files that they get from you if they contact you to have a check, to describe your approach and results. And they also intend to double check deforestation occurring by downloading some of your plots that have been submitted through traces to do their own checks. And this is very important because then it becomes very important that you have credible deforestation data, that you have credible commodity layers. And what do we mean with commodity layers? We map all the planted rubber, cocoa, etc. around the world because a change from forest to one of the EUDR crops, that is non-compliant. In practice, it can mean, just switch quickly back, Ingrid, to the previous one, because there can be some changes. This one, thank you, is super. Where forest, for example, due to deforestation becomes infrastructure, then it can be compliant. If rubber is cleared because it's not productive anymore and replanted with rubber, it can be compliant. But then this rubber should not be mistaken for forest, which is often the case in the maps by the EU Joint Research Center. A case where forest has been deforested for rubber, then it's non-compliant. It means that every year, in this example, we need to map where rubber is planted. And that is something that sets us aside as a service provider because with us, attention for the right data, it is critical. We have independent scientific accuracy assessment of this data. And in the next slide, you can see we are mapping these layers all the cocoa in the world, all the planted coffee, all the planted rubber in the world, because it's a critical component, we think, for doing EUDR right. We have an example in the next slide where we can see for this company that we just introduced how we have an automated approach of doing the checks based on the plots, which you can see here is uploaded into our system. The brown color again is the cocoa area. Here you see one of those plots. But the interesting thing is we don't only look at deforestation and conversion compliance in the plot. We also look around it for you to get an idea of the risks in the landscape. And also that is important as part of the methodology that you have to provide to the competent authorities to understand that. And finally, these kind of risk assessments you can export and provide PDF reports also to your buyers and your suppliers. And our clients are finding this very handy to have concrete discussions with either their buyers or their suppliers based on a tangible report they have, in addition to easy access to our application. And one of those clients happens to be in West Africa and is SIFCA. I give the word to Isabel.
Hello, everyone. So I hope everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you, Niels, for those very precious information. And so just to introduce myself, so my name is Isabel. I work at SIPH, a company that belongs to the SIFCA group here in West Africa. And I'm responsible for the EUDR strategy. And since 2023, I've been coordinating her group efforts around EUDR implementation, from operational alignment to audit readiness. And we are based in 4 different countries in the rubber section, which is Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, and Liberia. And so I'm going to introduce you to her roadmap to EUDR compliance. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, just a quick introduction about SIPH. So SIPH is part of the SIFCA group, which is the leading agro-industrial group in West Africa. So SIFCA has 4 different subsidiaries, which is Palmsi, Sanya, SAPH, and Sucrivoire. So we are on different segments like sugar, palm oil, and rubber. And for SIPH, which is her rubber section, we specialize in natural rubber production, from plantation to processing and exporting, almost 400,000 tons per year. And her clients are mainly the tire industry. And we work with over 60,000 smallholders, and we have 10 processing factories. And we are very proud to be the largest natural rubber producer in the region. And so just to tell you more about sustainability at SIFCA. So it's very important to understand that at SIFCA, sustainability is not just a topic. It's part of her DNA. And so here on the slide, you can see her sustainable trees with all of her engagement, which goes from governments, ethics, to environment, to communities, social inclusion. And for example, we are building schools in the communities. We had a zero deforestation policy for a very long time now, and we try to work very precisely on working conditions of the worker, but also the communities around her plantations. And so health, education, climate change, biodiversity, all of those are topics which we are really important for her activities. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we ensure traceability? So many of you know that EUDR is a huge challenge for everyone that's operating with smallholders and who are exporting. And so we've made very strong progress. We were actually ready in 2024, so we were actually very disappointed when the law was postponed. But for us, we did the geolocation of all of her smallholders with all the plots, with a control, with a geomaticians who controls and make sure that there's no mistakes with the polygons. We have segregation at the factory level, so you can see here on the that we have industrial plantation and smallholder plantations, and when they come to the rate bridge, we know directly if they are EUDR or not EUDR. And so EUDR is separated from non-EUDR throughout all of the process, and we assure traceability from the plantation to the clients. And one thing that is particular with SIPH is that we've been working with direct buyers. We have very few dealers or intermediaries, the one who are in between the farmers and us. So we like to buy directly with the farmers, which makes the value chain easier. Next slide, please. Yes, here you can see. Sorry, can you go back? Just. Yes, just here you can see a little example on the picture of the separation of the rubber at the factory. So this is something that we implement. We have strict rule about not mixing the rubber, and we ensure traceability at every level. Next slide, please. So we've been working with Satelligence since 2021. And mainly for deforestation alerts and land cover mapping. And what we particularly appreciate with working with Satelligence is the adaptability. So when EUDR started getting more and more serious, Satelligence were the first one to introduce us to their method. And we like how they integrate new elements very fast, which helped us to adapt to the environment. And one of the positive aspect were the lens map use, which was one of the most accurate if you compare it to for example, the map for from the EU that came out last year. So yeah, constant improvement of the software, adaptability, those are things we really like with working with Satelligence. So just to give you a few elements of the success. So for the next 5 years, we are trying to have 100% EUDR rubber in all of her subsidiaries. So the numbers right now, we have a high percentage of EUDR, which is 80% in Côte d'Ivoire, 100% in Nigeria and Liberia, and around 90% in Ghana. And so we were one of the most advanced in the world. And, we use Rubberway, and the legality bridge would help us to monitor legality. And so we had a very strong demand for EUDR very early. Some of the challenges we faced, in some countries like Côte d'Ivoire, is mainly some of the classified forests, which were, at some point, it was a bit confusing whether the farmers were in those, whether the forest was still classified or not, even though deforestation happened, more than 20 years ago. So we did have to work with the national law to understand how to place, those farmers. We've been doing a lot of audits to make sure that we are not having, legal issues like child labor, banned pesticide, etc., which demands a big number of field agents. And then one of the last challenges was the disparity in clients' demands. So although every client wants, zero deforestation, we did have a lot of different demands regarding the GPS points and regarding the documentation, which made things a bit challenging for us. So yes, thank you. That was a quick that was a quick presentation on what we've been doing, and I'm open if there are any questions.
All right. Thank you, Isabel. Can I ask you guys, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, success. Sorry, everybody, for the audio mishaps. Before you see, I changed the environment. Everything's fixed now. Very good. So Isabel, that was a really good overview of your journey and the amount of work you've done, and especially also looking beyond EUDR. Now you're very close to basically the growers, to the smallholders. You were talking a bit about it already, about how to engage them and what the challenges are. Can you tell us a bit more about how companies can help smallholders and farmers to comply?
So I think it depends really on the environment and in which you are. But for example, for the legality aspect, having a very clear understanding of the law and what is applied to farmers and not is the first step, I would say. And then I think for us, what we did was really communicating with the farmers and let them know that, okay, this regulation is coming. And so if your rubber is not traceable, and if we're seeing, for example, child labor, we won't be able to buy from you. So I think, constant communication and also, come along with the farmers to make sure that he's understanding everything that comes with EUDR. For example, we provide technical assistance to some of our farmers, and so it's a good occasion for us to exchange about those matters, and also, trying to have sort of like a discussion also with the government to make them understand and help you. For example, in Côte d'Ivoire, they had a land map use, which was not the case for Ghana, which made things a bit easier also.
Good to understand. Thank you for explaining further. We'll take, of course, more questions in the Q&A. But first, let's go back to Niels, who's going to tell us a bit more about how you can mitigate these risks and what you can actually do about it. Niels, take it away.
Thank you. So great to hear from a leader in West Africa on all the challenges and how to follow up on that. One of the challenges will be with EUDR risk mitigations. What does that mean? As I told you, we put a lot of effort at Satelligence at getting the right forest and planted commodity data, having that independently verified as one of the only ones. But then still, there can be disputes about people claiming otherwise. We integrate national government data, but we enhance it with these planted crop layers. But then still, there are so many service providers, next slide please, that there will always be disputes. And then it's also a fact that competent authorities must follow up on any substantiated complaint cases, for example, by campaigning NGOs, raised by campaigning NGOs. So that has to be followed up. As I said, with a lot of service providers, there will be a tsunami of wrong detections and disputes that also need handling. And what we see is that some of our prospects choose an IT provider that is only focusing on the resourcement planning, so the transaction and the transport logistics side of things, but not on following up on these potential disputes. So they cannot help you follow up in case of trouble and when a fine is maybe pending. Well, we've got the following approach for that. We digitalized the approach where you can use this module here to track and create cases on the platform. For example, if we have a cocoa plot here, which is overlapping with the national park boundary, and there's deforestation detected, you can create a case there yourself, or if a case from a campaigning NGO comes in, and then you can track what kind of actions have been taken. You can log these actions. And also you can share them directly with your suppliers or buyers and keep track of the response. And the nice thing here is that one of our clients, for example, said that, wow, this is great because we used to spend a lot of time on Excel and on the phone to ask for information and to update it. And it took us several weeks to work on this. But with this digital approach, it only takes us a few hours instead of weeks. So this will be one thing on risk mitigation that you can tick off from your requirements because it is in our system. And then the final step, let's be short on that. We also created APIs, so connections, digital connections to enable the DDS handling next, which is including the automated submission to the traces system, but also the download from the traces system to make sure that you can save and track the status of shipments. Because next slide, please. There are some clients who ask us to provide these DDS statements on their behalf. But there are also clients that say, well, no, we'll do that ourselves. But please, Satelligence, can you help us keep track of it? So we were last year already one of the first to get the approval for the traces system. We are expecting to have fully operational interactions at the end of the year. And actually, we also already had the first shipments sent with checks from customs over the past weeks. For example, palm oil from PNG and other areas to see, like with these dry runs, where the issues are. I think I should leave it at that. Here's another example where you see how our platform can perform these API integrations. All of this to make your life easier. With that, handing over to Ingrid.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Niels. That's a great bridge actually to Eva Riete from Graaf van Westfalen, because that brings us to the legal side of EUDR. A lot has been happening here over the past months. Eva, can you tell us what your view on this is?
Yes, sure. So hello and a very warm welcome to all of you from my side as well. I'm Eva Ritte. I work at the law firm GVW Graaf van Westfalen in our Berlin office, and I'm happy to be able to present to you the legal side of this webinar today. I will be talking about EUDR compliance, about the status quo, what we observe in our clients, and on what we think you should have achieved by now or in the next 6 months. Here's my short agenda that Ingrid is showing you right now. I'll be introducing our team very briefly so that you know who you're talking to, and then I will focus on the EUDR implementation must-dos and can-dos. I've also inserted 2 slides on the recent changes to the FAQs, the guidelines, and the proposal to change Annex 1. I don't think we'll have time to go into this in detail, but so you have it on the slides, you can read on it further, or we can talk about it in the Q&A maybe. So the Green Trade team at GVW is a team of lawyers that specializes in anything related to supply chain due diligence. So anything that has to do with sustainability and due diligence in the supply chain is what we deal with legally. On the next slide, you can see a couple of the legal acts that we mainly work on. It's in German, but I think it's partially, but I think it's understandable. Practically, we've mainly been working in the past year or 2 years on the German Supply Chain Act, the LKSG, and the EUDR, actually. Prospectively, of course, we'll also be working on the CSDDD once we all know how the omnibus process ends, and how it will be implemented nationally. And then we also have been working on the carbon border adjustment mechanism and the conflict minerals regulation. We're embedded in a larger team of foreign trade lawyers. So our team works a lot on sanctions, a lot of sanctions to do with Russia, of course, customs, tariffs, export control, foreign direct investment, so anything that has to do with international trade and limitations to international trade. And this, in turn, is embedded into a larger law firm of 250 lawyers across all of Germany and a couple of locations abroad. Here you can see a couple of our faces of the Green Trade and the International Trade team. But without further ado, let me talk to you about what you're most interested in, which is the EUDR. So on compliance readiness and the current state of affairs, really what we see from our clients is a very mixed picture. So some larger companies are basically ready and compliant already, and several smaller or mid-sized companies are still struggling with very basic interpretative questions or questions of practical implementation. What is important for everyone is to remember the deadlines and timelines, of course, which for medium and large companies would be the 30th of December of this year, and for small and micro enterprises would be the 30th of June of next year. The must-dos that I've written down for you here are an implementation roadmap in 5 steps, basically. The first being that you need to understand your legal obligations as well as your own effectiveness. This is maybe the most important point because everything else builds upon this. And in case of doubt, we obviously believe that it's important to seek legal assistance earlier rather than later. This can be helpful with regard to specific legal interpretative questions, with regard to questions of specific effectiveness of different companies within your company group, with regard to matching the correct HS code with your products, and so on. For example, this last point can, for example, be much more complex than you would think at the beginning. We also see that in sanctions law a lot of the time, actually, that some products could fall within under one HS code, but also under another, or even 3 or more. So you have specialized customs lawyers that can be very helpful in giving you or judging it for you on if your product actually falls under the scope of the EUDR or not. And then, of course, there's also training sessions by the EU Commission. There's training videos online. There's lots of support and information out there by now. So this step you should, in the best case, have completed by now. So you should know your own effectiveness and have an overview of your legal obligations. Second step, probably even more work here, is to collect your data. The legal basis for this step is Article 9 EUDR, where you'll find a very detailed list of information that needs to be collected, organized, and kept for 5 years. Partially, this data has to be directly included into your due diligence statement. You'll find in Annex 2 of the EUDR. Hence, this info really has to absolutely be there by the end of the year. So you should probably prioritize this information. With other information requirements, you don't have to directly insert them into your due diligence statement, but you have to guarantee that you've sort of collected the info and that you have evidence for it at hand. This is, for example, Article 9.1h, adequately conclusive and verifiable information that the relevant commodities have been produced in accordance with the relevant legislation of the country of production. So basically verifying that you've complied with the legality requirement of the EUDR. And this is, of course, a prerequisite that is much more difficult to comply with than collecting location data, for example, or at least it's a legal term requiring interpretation. So here we think that it's important that companies should, if they haven't already done so, make sure to do the interpretative work as soon as possible and really understand what this specific information requirement entails for them. Ideally, you should at least have started this process already, or even better, be at a near complete stage, or of course, have completed it. The third point is to conduct your risk assessment. Legal basis here is Article 10 EUDR. So on the basis of the information and data that you have collected under Article 9, you now need to conduct an assessment of risk for non-compliance of your relevant products. And there's, of course, various ways to practically do this. But in any case, you will have to address all the criteria that are listed in Article 10.2 for each relevant product. So, for example, where was my product produced? What are the product-specific risks? Is the supply chain particularly complex? Are there indications of a company in the supply chain being involved in illegal practices? A good hint here could, for example, be if any substantiated concerns have been submitted regarding a specific company under Article 31 EUDR. What other reliable information do I have? And so on and so forth. Ideally, you are in this process now or will start it very soon. Please note that this step can be somehow skipped or partially skipped if you're only sourcing from low-risk countries according to the EU benchmarking system. However, as Niels has already sort of raised already, we would be very, very cautious here as well, because the conclusion that you're really only sourcing from low-risk countries or areas needs to be based on a process of assessing the complexity of the relevant supply chain and the risk of circumventing the EUDR, even accidentally, and the risk of mixing your products with products of unknown origin or products from high-risk or standard-risk countries. And you need to be able to prove that you've gone through this entire assessment process and that there's really no risk or only a negligible risk of mixing or circumvention. So we would not recommend taking a simple not my problem approach, but to at least be have some general awareness here. Then, as a fourth step, if necessary, you need to implement your risk mitigation measures. This could be asking for additional information, data, or documents from your suppliers, carrying out independent surveys or audits, or taking any other measures pertaining to information requirements. And this is, of course, a very individual decision, so there's no specific time frame for this. Very much depends on what you find out in the steps beforehand and when certain problems pop up. And as the last step, of course, you need to submit your due diligence statements by the end of the year or the middle of next year, depending on your company size. What else do we have in terms of can-dos or recommendations? The first one would be to take or to attempt a comprehensive transformation instead of a box-ticking approach. So we recommend not just doing the bare minimum, but seeing the EUDR implementation as part of a bigger transformative process, potentially creating synergies between the implementation of the EUDR and the implementation of other supply chain due diligence obligations. For example, if your company will prospectively also be affected by the CSDDD. But even just within the frame of the EUDR, it is foreseen that you take a bit of a more systematic or structural approach. Because, for example, Article 12 of the EUDR also obliges companies to establish and maintain a due diligence system. And also at other points in the regulation, you find formulations like companies need adequate and proportionate policies, controls, and procedures. So it's within the spirit of the law, but it's also our experience that it makes compliance in the long run much easier if you integrate it into your company's policies. Second point would be to make your voice heard. For example, make use of public consultation processes like the one that was just closed by the EU Commission on the proposal for changes of Annex 1, but also use other channels. Talk to your national competent authority, to MEPs from your country, maybe engage in public dialogue. Because there are so many, or there have been so many questions of unclarity and uncertainty with the EUDR, that it's important to realize that you can maybe contribute to shaping the understanding of the EUDR, or even contribute to changing some specificities of the law in the future. The third point that we also find very important is stakeholder engagement. We've talked about that a little bit as well already. So engage with stakeholders on all levels, because this will make it much easier for you to understand specific issues and needs. For example, understanding the difficulty of providing written evidence for land use rights when both parties of a rental agreement in a certain country are actually illiterate, or when verbal contracts are the norm in a certain area. So it'll be much more helpful for you to know this, and then you can maybe develop a solution together on how to still find evidence that you need for land use rights according to the EUDR. But you can do this collaboratively with stakeholders. This is actually also an integral part of the EUDR that you can see in Article 30 on partnerships and cooperation. But it'll also, we think, make your life much easier. And also be aware that you will not only be checked by public authorities, but that you may also be checked by stakeholders. Article 31 gives natural or legal persons the possibility to bring forward substantiated concerns on EUDR non-compliance, and then national competent authorities actually have to assess these concerns and have to go after them. So it's much easier, we believe, for companies to take a collaborative approach with stakeholders right from the beginning than to get a national authority involved, of course. And then as the last point, obviously, we also recommend consider using a digital tool. This should ideally have happened already, because we see also in our from our clients that it can help very much already to bring structure into the relevant information and data, and to not drown in this overload of information. So these were my must-dos and can-dos. As said, I won't go into detail about the substantive changes of the EU Commission's interpretation of the EUDR that we have just seen in the new FAQs and new guidance document, but we can maybe talk about that a little bit more now in the FAQ session, in case you have any questions about specific points there. Or else on the last slide, you can also see my contact details again. So you can always reach out to us, to me or the whole team, and we're glad to assist with any EUDR struggle that you may have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Eva. That was great. You set the bar very high. I'm sure everybody will have more on their to-do list, even those who said that they were already fully prepared. But now a particular question, because we know there's also some people in the room that are further downstream, and some of the changes you were highlighting also affect those further downstream. Can you say a bit more about how the situation changed for them with the recent updates?
Yes, I can. About the so market participants or traders and operators further down in the supply chain were for a long time pretty unsure about what their obligations would actually be in the case that a operator or trader further up in the supply chain has already submitted a due diligence statement, and if they would still have to go through the entire due diligence process themselves again. And there has been a clarification in the new FAQs on the term "certain" in Article 4, I think it's point 8 or 9 of the EUDR, because it was always very much, it says, okay, you have to ascertain that the operator or trader or the operator before you in the supply chain has fulfilled the due diligence, but no one really knew what ascertaining means. And so now in the new FAQ, we can read that this is actually a very small legal obligation only. So the only thing that you have to do according to the new FAQs is to record the reference number of the upstream due diligence declaration and check their validity, and then refer to this number in your own due diligence statements. So the Commission itself speaks of a minimal legal obligation for downstream operators. From our experience, many companies had assumed that they were actually subject to further obligations in order to comply with the term "ascertain," because ascertaining sort of sounds as if you really have to make sure that something has been done. And only having a due diligence statement doesn't necessarily mean that the content of the due diligence statement is correct, that the process that happened before is correct, and so on. And so we would actually still be very, very cautious with only fulfilling this minimal obligation, because in the event of a breach of the EUDR, you remain ultimately responsible, which is also stated in Article 4, paragraph 10 of the regulation itself. So what else could you do? Of course, in any case, it's recommendable to probably have a contractual protection for passing on the reference number. So have certain clauses in contracts with your suppliers that oblige them to give you the relevant information. But then you could, of course, also check the plausibility of the information in the due diligence declaration. You could address a questionnaire to your supplier or to certain suppliers to check their EUDR compliance systems and procedures. You could collect information yourself. In the worst case, you could go somewhere and conduct an audit. So there's a multitude of measures that you can still take, and that the Commission, interestingly, also notes down in the new FAQs. So you can see that the Commission also, they say it's a minimal legal obligation, but only if you can be sure that your previous supply chain participant does everything correctly, and you can't really be sure of that. So I think also not knowing how cautious or strict national competent authorities will be, it is very advisable to have some papers in your drawer that prove that you've done a little bit more than just looking at the reference number of a due diligence statement, especially if there's any indication that something might be off in the supply chain.
Thank you, Eva. That is a very complete overview there. Then before we go to the Q&A, some last things from Niels. Anything else you'd want to add?
Yeah, I'll make it quick. One key thing to do, start today together. We can focus on, if you have to make a decision on your provider today, don't buy just another IT tool, because without quality data, it's just an empty shell. We showed that competent authorities will themselves do a double check on the deforestation data, and that's one of the key things you want to get right. So better have good quality, credible data there. Partnerships will be very important to get more plot data if you don't have it. Also, partnerships with peers operating in the landscape. That is what some of our clients have been doing, exchanging there to reduce cost. This might be an interesting idea for you. And finally, we showed in this webinar that having satellite maps of where the crops grow each year are important to see if forest changed into a non-compliance for EUDR. And also having this data can reduce the cost of knowing where to go to map additional plots. If you already know there's rubber growing there, you can go there specifically with these coordinates to get the plot data there. These might be some hacks to make life easier and get this plot data faster. And then finally, to wrap it up, so we showed today that one of the roadmap things for the next months could be we finalize your data collection. Together we do that. Together we perform risk assessments, make sure the legal stuff is in order, and prepare for shipments. And then finally start submitting the DDS documentation. Let's leave it at that, and see if there are some questions.
Thanks, Niels. That's great. Let's move to the Q&A here. Quite a few questions that came in here. I have a question. Question here for SIFCA. What are the key steps/sections to develop a due diligence system from scratch, and how many departments to bring on board at once? Isabel, could you say something about that topic?
Yes, sure. So the first step, obviously, is to understand the EUDR requirements. So look at what is asked in terms of traceability, in terms of legality. And for us, what we did is that we did the geolocation, which allow us to then start the risk assessment system. And so it was based on the land cover, it was based on the legality risk, and the legality risk depends very much on each different countries. And then we use tools like Satelligence or the land occupation map from the Bennett to see what are the risks related to deforestation. We had, for the legality, we had a third party specialized in law to do a legality grid to see what applies in terms of legality to the smallholders. And so it was like sort of like a checklist to see what is the gap between what we have and what we're supposed to have. And so that allow us to understand, what was said about land title, for example. In Côte d'Ivoire, we saw that it wasn't a requirement, but there are still projects, to address land title to the farmers. And then it was, have someone specifically in each country, who are responsible for the governance and management related to EUDR. And we did a lot also of internal audits and one external audits by a third party as well.
That was a very complete answer, Isabel. Thank you very much. I hope that gives our participants some further guidance here. Then we have another question for Eva. There's been some news on possible further simplification of EUDR. Do you expect changes to still be made this late in the game? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's very hard to sort of know what the EU institutions are doing these days because we see this new trend of reopening up legislation that has only just been passed, for example, with the CSDDD or the CSRD and so on. But from what I know at the moment is that I don't see any concrete proposals on the table except for the proposal to change Annex 1 that the Commission put forward in April. And I guess this is going to be adopted. Pretty sure that this will happen because I don't think the other institutions have raised any concerns against it, but that doesn't really mean any far-reaching substantive changes to the content of the EUDR. And apart from that, I've also only heard rumors if maybe the EUDR will be included in the omnibus or not. But so far, I don't think there's anything reliable that really points into this direction. So honestly, I don't think that this is going to happen. No.
Okay, good to know. So keep preparing, I think. Then a question for Niels here. What's your opinion on open source global forest watch deforestation data?
Well, first of all, Global Forest Watch is a really great tool, but with any data, it's very important to consider what is the purpose of this data and is it fit for purpose. So Global Forest Watch data is great to inform global policy, to raise awareness on global issues. But if the purpose is to use such data, which is meant for global observation for very local plot level applications, that's not the right way. So we had in a work together with the World Cocoa Foundation, they commissioned the CGR Institute, CIAT, independent scientists to review 21 open data sets, including a data set from Satelligence as the only provider that is able to provide global data. And they concluded that this kind of Global Forest Watch data should not be recommended for EUDR purposes compliance. And the Satelligence data came, we were very proud of that, out as the most precise. So I think that is very important to keep in mind. We're not saying it's bad data. We have to know that it has to be fit for purpose. That is kind of the key thing.
Okay, thank you, Niels. Great to hear that distinction pointed out. All right, we're nearly at the top of the hour. I want to thank our speakers very much for giving that extra context here. Isabel with that like close to the ground perspective and all the work that needs to be done in the field to pull the EUDR off. Eva with that legal perspective and putting us back on our toes about what we should really be getting in order. And Niels for explaining a bit about what tools we can use to do that. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for participating and good luck the coming 6 months. All right. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.